Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Connecting the Dots, hosted by 49 Marketing. Connecting the Dots is a podcast series featuring people from across the marketing sphere, sharing what motivates, challenges and inspires them. I'm Neil Robertson, the founder of 49 Marketing, and joining me on this podcast this week is Lee O'Connor. Lee, how you doing, mate?
I'm not too bad. I've got a little bit of a cough today, Neil, so I'll do my best not to keep interrupting your podcast with phlegm.
You and me both, mate. So just for clarity, for the people watching, I ate a couple of paracetamol before we started. So yeah, I'm very much feeling the winter chill at the moment. It is fucking freezing, isn't it?
It is. It's bitter today. It's bitter, but I'm okay. I'll get on with it, mate. That's okay.
Yeah. So Lee is the founder of Soloco Creative and specializes in content writing, content strategy, and email marketing. And on top of all that, as we say up here in Liverpool, he's a fucking boss fella. So Lee and I met at a local networking event, and I've been enjoying his regular newsletters ever since. So Lee, thanks for joining, mate.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to
it. You're my first ever subscriber, by the way. I don't know if I told you that. You're the first subscriber to my YouTube channel.
Oh, really?
Yeah. How does it feel?
Well, I don't know. There was less than 40 people, wasn't there, at the first Sex Pistols gig?
Yeah.
But when they made it big, thousands claimed that gig. So I kind of feel like, when this really, really takes off, I can say I was actually one of the originals. I was the first subscriber,
I will take that comparison all day long. I think I'm a little bit more of an amenable character than John Lydon is, but I get the reference nonetheless. I think if I get 40,000 subscribers and you can say you were the first one, then we'll look back on this day with fond recollection.
100%.
So as is obligatory with these podcasts, we're going to start with a job interview-esque question that isn't explicitly tell me about yourself, but basically is. So where did your journey start, mate? Can you give us a little bit of an overview into that?
Yeah, well, we've got an hour, haven't we, Neil? So do you want the long version?
Yeah, go for the long version, always.
Well, I've always been good at writing, ever since I was little. I remember being in junior school and having to go and stand up in front of assembly and read short stories I'd written. And then going into seniors, I'd get called out to lessons to go and help the teachers write their assemblies, which was, always good. I'd be in the middle of French or something, and a teacher from another class going, I've got an assembly tomorrow, can you come and help me write it? And then even getting called out, I remember one time getting called out to help the A-level drama students, so the sixth formers, to help them write a play for their A-level. I must have been in year 9 or something like that at the time. So it's just something that I've always been good at. It's always come naturally to me in terms of writing. But I suppose poetry was my first love, and in a roundabout way, which I'll talk you through now, and that's what ultimately got into copywriting. So it's a bit of a sad story, Neil, to be honest. About 23, I got me heart broken, and I was in this serious funk. It's first ever love, first ever heartbreak. Yeah. And I was in a funk for ages. And my dad had emigrated to Australia, and I decided to follow him out. I thought, a change of scenery will help put me straight. But all it did was make things worse. I was now thousands of miles away from home, living in Perth, which is one of the most isolated big cities in the world, and no one to talk to. So by trying to escape, I just isolated myself completely. So kind of amidst that loneliness and sadness, I really started writing poetry with a vengeance. And then after a few months, I ended up with this thick red A4 pad full of verses about love and heartbreak and the state of the world and woe is me, and all that kind of stuff, really emotional. And I started posting them on Facebook, as you do. Now when I get Facebook memories, I'm always cringing. But people seem to like them, and a relative got in touch and said I should be a songwriter. I should turn them into songs. And he offered to teach me piano and guitar, and told me I'd be a star, basically. And that's the first time that it entered my mind that I might actually be able to make a living by writing words. So that's what I did. I came back from Australia, learned some basic chords on the piano and the guitar and whatnot, and started writing and performing songs. Ultimately formed a band called The Other Two Hats, which, if you say it fast, will give you an idea of the style, the other twats. So played a couple of gigs and all that, but the trouble was I was back living with my mum, signing on, not paying any rent. So she didn't want to be Arctic Monkey, lounging around the house at the time. She wanted me to have a job. But I was determined that I wasn't going to go back to like working in call centres or on building sites, which is what I'd done before. I wanted to do, something creative. And eventually I came across an introduction to radio course. It was by a company called the Aerial Trust, and it was only available to people signing on. So it was a 12-week course where you'd learn how to, the basics of writing and presenting a news bulletin, how to edit audio, how to put together an hour-long radio show, and how to write radio ads was one of the modules. So anyway, completed the 12-week course, got a little certificate and all that. And a couple of weeks later, the organizer of the course got in touch and said Radio City, which is one of the big radio stations in Liverpool, were looking for junior copywriters. And he thought that I should go for it. So he put me forward for it, and good enough, I got down to the final two. And that's when they asked me for examples of my writing. And all I had was this A4 red pad of like forlorn poetry, all this kind of heartbreak poetry. And that's what I presented to you. I remember sliding it across the desk to the commercial director at Radio City at the time and saying, well, this is examples of my work. And he was reading this one called Silent Song, which was particularly sorrowful. And I just remember him like open-mouthed reading through this pad, sliding it back without saying a word, thanking me and, sending me on my way. Thinking, well, that's, I've fucked it, basically. All the way home thinking who takes a book of love poems to an interview. But good enough, I got a call a day or so later and he said he'd loved it and the demonstration of creativity and stuff and offered me the job. So I've become a junior writer, a junior copywriter at Radio City on the back of some particularly emotional poetry.
Can we get any snippets from that particular poem, or are you allowed to tell us any?
Well, would you ever wake up in the middle of the night wondering where your birth certificate is? Things like that. You just have that panic. Well, I woke up thinking about this red pad a few weeks back, and I can't find it. That this, had all the originals in. But I can remember a little bit of Silent Song. I think the intro was, "This is my silent song with nobody singing along. There are no words because I have no feeling. There's no music for me to believe in." I think was the opening verse. But I kind of, as I got to know the commercial director, working there, he was a very straight, unemotional guy. Which, it wasn't really into that kind of thing. But as I say, his face at the time, reading through that pad was an absolute picture.
That line, "There's no music for me to believe in," that's really good. I mean this as a compliment, although it wouldn't be a compliment if we were talking about the Morrissey of today, but it sounds like a Morrissey lyric from way back when. Like the song Panic, what is it? "Hang the DJ, because the music he plays says nothing to me about my life."
It was all along those lines, It was, as I say, I was particularly sad at the time, so it was all a very common theme. But that's all I had, Neil. When they said examples of your work, that's all I could think to present because I had no other experience really. So yeah, and it paid off.
So one thing I didn't actually mention at the start was that this whole, and it'll be in the title anyway, but this podcast is about finding copywriting inspiration from unusual places. But what I love about your example there is how unorthodox it is, in the sense that, like, you've had this heartbreak, you're in Perth, you're writing all this poetry, and then, as you said before, who would go into a Radio City interview? But that just shows that they found inspiration in an unusual place as well as you did. You found it in an unusual place, but they did, because, as you're saying, the guy's reading it and you're thinking, I'm never going to get this job. And then you were wrong because you did. It just goes to show where all these amazing ideas can come from.
Yeah, 100%. And I suppose ultimately what they were looking for was a demonstration of skill. So the subject matter was irrelevant. It was just to show that there was some creative spark there, and that they could develop that and mold me, I suppose, into a radio copywriter from those examples.
Amazing. And how did you find that, Lee? How was the whole experience of working at Radio City?
It was a brilliant experience. As I say, I I was the junior copywriter, so there was 2 copywriters above me, exceptionally talented, and it put me well on the way, I suppose, to where I am now, because radio copy for the ads in particular it's usually no more than 30 seconds. So learning how to be concise and getting a message across as quickly and as impactfully as possible, that was an amazing learning curve. And just learning from the other writers, how you could easily cut words and have and retain the message. You know what I mean? Cut the fluff. Essentially was the biggest skill I learned there. And being able to get a message across in a very, very short space of time.
That was what I learned being in local newspapers. Well, I worked for a local newspaper the first 2 years of my career, and it was brutal at times. You really, that saying, learn fast. But what was it? No, not learn fast. Like make mistakes fast. And fail fast. Sorry, I got there in the end. Fail fast. That was what I did, really. I mean, there were times where I made some really big cock-ups that I was embarrassed by, but you learned so much about how to, cut the bullshit, basically, how to tighten it all up, how to get facts right, how to spell names correctly, which I still see some copywriters not doing. Yes. It's a real education, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. There was a word that I'm not sure anybody else in the world uses, but Sam and Bruno, who were the senior copywriters, used to have a word they used, which was plippers.
Okay.
And that was kind of the creative element. So if I'd write a draft, a draft ad, and it was all well structured, and the information was in there, and it was written to time, they'd often say to me, well, but where's the plippers? And what they meant, where's the creative spark? Where's the hook? Do you know what I mean? How are you going to get the listener to tune into that? Yeah. Go back and apply the plippers to it. So that's something else that I've always carried, is what's the point of difference in this copy? You can't just have line after line of facts.
I like as well. I like within that example how they've put that on you to solve the problem as well. So they've not said we think it would look better with A or B. They've said you need to come up. Was it plippers? Sorry, PLI.
Yeah, PLIPPERS, plippers.
Amazing phrase. I'm going to start using that. Things like that, saying you need to have plippers to it. And at the time, you were probably thinking, well, what the fuck do you mean by that? What I don't know what to do. I got told that quite early on. Make it more interesting. Must pass the so fucking what test. I actually got taught by a guy, Barry, his name was, when I was studying for my NCTJ diploma, and he was the most scouse guy ever. And he always said, I mean, I don't necessarily agree fully with this, because I think there's a time and place for long sentences. But he was always saying, if it's over 25 words, start rewriting. If it's over 40 words, start panicking. And yes. It was a good education for me, Lee, honestly. And it sounds like it was the same for you, where I was like, because I was always quite a waffly writer. Yourself, I'm quite a talkative person, and that would transmit into the way I wrote sometimes. And I needed to basically be told, listen, why use 40 words when 15 would do? And I've worked with writers before where, they've had talent, but you look at what they write and you think you could have cut about half of this sentence out.
Yes.
So, it really was a great education for me. And obviously it was for you as well. So, that ties in nicely with the next question, which I think it's a somewhat broad and unimaginative question, but since we work in a similar discipline, and a lot of other writers will be watching this, I'm intrigued to know, what does good copy mean to you?
Well, it's a great question. The answer's probably more than an hour long, to be honest. But aside from the obvious, clear and concise, which I think that's copywriting advice 101. We've just mentioned that they're talking about, writing a radio ad, you've got 30 seconds, so it needs to be straight to the point. So clear and concise is obvious. But above and beyond that, good copy for me has got to be entertaining.
Yeah.
It's got to be emotive. Because particularly these days, Neil, we're constantly being bombarded with information, aren't we? From all angles, So something wants to get my attention for a minute, 2 minutes, whatever it might be. It better entertain me.
Yeah.
And it better make me feel something. And that's usually through storytelling.
Yeah.
I think good copy always tells a great story and leaves you with a new perspective about a subject. Where you come away from reading it and thinking, "Oh, I hadn't thought of it in that way before."
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think sometimes, look, there's a lot that people are saying about AI at the moment, and there's a lot to be said for it. But to me, it just says things the exact same way that every other copywriter is doing. Like someone said that if you use the copy that AI churns out, and we are going to come on to talk about AI later on, but if you're using the copy that churns out, I mean, AI is basically aggregating what's already on page one, which mostly is crap. Like, even though it ranks very highly, that doesn't really mean anything. It's more about what the copy triggers people to do, I should say. It's really got to stand out, hasn't it? And I think sometimes you do see a lot of imitation, really.
Yes. Yeah, I think that we spoke about this on a call. Sorry, the dog's barking in the background.
Don't worry, always got time for dogs barking.
We spoke on a few days ago about kind of the repetition of copy advice, and it's something that I said up front to answer that question, clear and concise. But clarity and conciseness shouldn't come at the cost of education, entertainment, and making something a motive. You can be clear and be extremely dull. So you've got to find the flippers, Neil, haven't you? And give it.
That's our new favourite word.
But you've got to give people a reason to keep reading past the first couple of lines, and this kind of standard advice, albeit good advice, about clarity and conciseness and short sentences. I think for it to be truly good copy, there's got to be something over and above that, and I don't think AI has got there yet.
No. We will come on to talk about AI. I kind of mentioned that question a little bit prematurely, but we'll see if we can slag off AI a bit further down the line. I'm sure we can. One word you used there, which I think is really pertinent to this episode, was entertainment. So, obviously with the title being your copywriting inspiration in unusual places, not just finding the copy from an entertaining source, but making it entertaining. So in doing some research for this podcast, I actually Googled that keyword, copywriting inspiration in unusual places. And I came across an article which listed airline newsletters and perfume bottles. So airline newsletters and perfume bottles were among the most common places you never thought to look as a copywriter, apparently. So I thought they were quite random suggestions. I'll take their word for it. I've never found copywriting inspiration for those things before, probably because I've not looked in those places. But I mean, can you top that? And if so, have you got any other suggestions to add?
Well, I'm going away in a few weeks, so I'll certainly be looking at the airline magazine for some inspiration. It's going to sound really, really cliche and a bit of a cop out, but I think there's inspiration to be found everywhere. In the most mundane, everyday stuff. I think you can spin it and make it entertaining. But I find a lot of my copywriting inspiration from personal experience. So if I'm trying to answer a particular question, or make the reader feel a particular way, I kind of revert back to things that have happened to me in the past or places I've been, and then try and reframe it, to make it entertaining, but to also offer the solution to the reader. So, for example, I recently used a story of how I nearly killed myself on a quad bike. In Bulgaria, and that was to explain the importance of nailing a brief. So essentially what happened is on my stag do, my friends decided that the activity that we would do was quad bike riding. Now, I don't drive. I am not good behind a wheel or any kind of motorized vehicle, but that's what they decided we were going to do. So I only got 200 yards on this giant quad before I crashed it off this huge ditch. Must have been 8 foot deep, and it landed on top of me. So I had the engine right next to my face, burning, all my leg was all mangled, and they had to winch me and the quad out of this ditch. So I used that experience to kind of say that's because my friends didn't understand the brief, and this is the danger of not understanding the brief. So I think there's lots of kind of solutions to everyday questions or questions that your reader have. There's lots of solutions just within personal everyday experience, and if there can be an amusing anecdote in there along the way, then all the better.
Someone should have got a photo of you in that exact moment and your friends watching on worriedly. And what they should have done was, like a meme, they should have said the brief, the writer, and the writer is you wedged under this quad bike, like, please help me, like on the verge of death.
Absolutely. The worst thing about it was not the fact that I genuinely was close to death, but from a bravado point of view, the guys who were running the tour said, "You want to get back on?" So I did.
No way.
So I did. So I maybe got half a mile before I thought, no, this is like really, really not for me. But we'd gone too far to go back. Yeah. So I had to get on the back of this Bulgarian guy's quad who was shirtless. It was 35 degrees, and I had to hold on to him for 2 hours, going around this. Yeah.
And there's another analogy in there as well, isn't there? In the sense that, you're past the point of no return. Once you've briefed the writer, if the writer's, not sure, but you're resistant to their questions, or you're saying, listen, I've explained this, just get on with it. And then the copy isn't quite right. That's a lot like your experience at the end as well. It's like, well, you passed the point of no return. You gave me this brief and this is what happened.
That's it. Exactly it. So that's something that I quite often look into. Obviously depends, on the audience and what you're writing for. But I think everyday experience is everyday experience for that particular, for that very reason. People find themselves in situations, don't they? And if you can explain something relatively common or funny to kind of get them to where you want to be, I think that's a really nice way of doing it. But go on, sorry.
No, I was going to say that will make a brilliant short clip on LinkedIn. I think that like when I record these, I'm sometimes thinking, right, what am I going to clip up as a teaser for the show? And that is going to be so good. That's perfect. In fact, to be honest, it's like we could almost just stop it there. It's just such a powerful.
Yeah. We've peaked too soon. Neil.
I know, it's brilliant. Well, hopefully not, because I think we've got some, this next question, and obviously this was the whole, premise of your summary for this. When we were discussing it, was about the role of hip hop artists and the language skills that they employ in creating music, and also the obvious consideration of their target audience within their music. And listen, I know from reading your newsletters, this is a huge focus for you, and it's something that you reference all the time. So can you talk a bit more about this and how you perceive the influence of rap artists within the field of copywriting?
Yeah, 100%. So, aside from these kind of everyday experiences and falling off quads and things, I think music is really, really important. Music in all its forms. I think there's so much to be said about listening to good music while you're writing. And the reason for that is song lyrics are amazing of summing up situations and feelings, aren't they, in a really, really nice, catchy, memorable ways. And quite often, if I'm struggling for something, a tune will come on the radio, and I think, oh, that's perfect. That's the angle I need to take it. What this song is trying to get across. But I don't think. I think that hip hop is probably the most effective at that in terms of giving copywriting inspiration, because its influence as a music genre is hip hop's influence on marketing is immense. It's probably underestimated. I find if you think about its impact on fashion, on vernacular, on attitudes over the past 50 years, I don't think there's another music genre that comes close to it. No. Adidas Superstar trainers, Escalades, Hennessy, Beats headphones, so many products owe their success to them being embraced by hip hop artists. And I don't see that being true of any other music genre. But in copywriting in particular, again, I think its influence and its potential for influence is also massively underestimated. So you've just referred to my emails there. I wrote a limited series, which was called The Art of Storytelling. And that was to explore how copywriters can kind of improve the game, if you like, by taking certain cues from hip-hop artists. So I kind of broke it down into a few sections. One of them being all great copy starts with a killer opening line. You know, you got to have that attention grabbing headline to pique the reader's interest. And all the best rappers are great at doing that, at hooking you in with that first line. My favorite example of that is from Puff Daddy's Victory, his song called Victory, where the opening line is, "Yo, the sun don't shine forever."
Yeah.
And I thought, in terms of generating urgency, which is what, you know, a copywriter should be doing for a product, is generating a sense of urgency. You know, what better way to catch someone's attention to say the sun don't shine forever? You know, things aren't going to be around. I think you can look to so many hip hop songs where you think, oh, that is a brilliant way of catching somebody's attention and taking their lead from that. And then you've got things like, you know, metaphors and similes, which again, as copywriters, we kind of use all the time. But you've got to be careful not to use hackneyed phrases. You know, you've got to try and kind of, you know, constantly reinvent metaphors and similes. So again, listen to hip hop, and it's like a masterclass of how to deliver metaphor and simile. Like, I'm sweet like licorice, dangerous like syphilis, from Lauryn Hill is, you know, one of the greatest similes ever. Then we've got Lil Wayne, who says real G's move in silence like lasagna.
God, yeah, I remember that line.
Which it's genius. You know, and it's just by listening to these things, you think, oh wow, that is so clever. How can I apply that technique to what I'm writing today? Can I take that as inspiration, you know, and use it? And probably my favorite, you know, amongst the metaphors and similes, of which there are countless examples, is Jay-Z, when he says, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman." Which he is. I think he's worth was the first hip hop billionaire.
I believe so.
You know, which is incredible, but just incredibly subtle. Incredibly subtle language that is really impactful and really gets a message across. And for me, listening to this kind of stuff, I just think, oh wow, that is genius. Now, and I want to live up to being able to.
The licorice and syphilis line is so good. I'm not familiar with Lauryn Hill so much. I know she's a massive artist, but I haven't listened much to her. But that line is incredible because it sounds the same as well. The vowels are the same, the syllables are the same. And it applies perfectly to the two examples. I do think sometimes with rap music, people turn their nose up at it because of how these people look and how they carry themselves. But when you think about it, you talked about poetry. There it is, poetry, and the ingenuity that's required to come up with this is far better than any of the clean cut pop artists that you see nowadays. Or I don't even care what genre you throw out. Like, I like alt rock music, but I would include that in there as well. I think, you know, especially I'm quite intrigued by the rise of grime music. You know, people like obviously Dave and Stormzy. I might be showing my age a little bit by the fact that I can't really name too many others off the top. Oh, Central C is another one. Who's the one that he's rivals with? I can't remember his name. There's another London rapper whose name escapes me at the moment. But you know, all these guys who are sort of spearheading the UK music scene at the moment, and they are probably amongst the biggest names. But people still turn their nose up at them because of the way they look. It's like, well, could you put a verse together like that, like the one I've just mentioned? You know, and even when you go further back, you know, when you were talking about classic rap music, I know this one's very simple, but it's the one from Juicy by Notorious B.I.G. It was all a dream, because he kind of, in the song, I feel he kind of moves between a sort of dreamlike scenario and a reality. And actually, the thing is, his dream did become a reality because he started out, you know, at the kind of the bottom of the ladder, so to speak, talking about what his life used to be like and what it's like now. and it was all a dream back then. But that opening line just sets the scene so well. But I've made about 5 different points in one there. But I think that these people deserve a lot more respect than what they get, I think, is the overarching point there.
Yeah, 100%. And coincidentally enough, you mentioned the grime scene and in the UK. It was actually watching Top Boy.
Yeah, Top Boy. I've been watching it. Brilliant.
Yeah, that's where I came up with the inspiration to write this hip hop series. So as much as I love 90s hip hop and classic rap, it was actually UK grime that put it into perspective for me, because I thought, wow, these people, these artists, they're so skilled at putting you in an environment that you're not familiar with. And I think that is for all writers, but for copywriters as well. You need to be able to make somebody feel a certain way and to make them understand a certain perspective quite quickly when you're trying to sell them a product or service. Yeah. And I don't think there's anybody better than that. Maybe Bob Dylan years ago, or Springsteen from a more classic music point of view. But you listen to a rap song or a grime song, and whether you've ever been involved in gang violence or whatever it might be, you can understand straight away, and you can picture it. The way they paint pictures with the storytelling is second to none. And I think that's why for me, I see it as such a source of inspiration. Yeah.
I mean, to be honest with you, when I watched Top Boy, I was straight onto Spotify, getting all the songs from it. Like there was one called Gangsteritis at the end of, is it series 2? Well, the old school Top Boy fans will say it's series 4, but we call it series 2. But that was awesome. So I got onto that. I liked all of the, I don't know what the politically correct term is, but like the Caribbean slang that they would use in it as well. So I've been listening to a bit of Kano and some of his music employed that. I thought that was really cool. And how it tied in with the story being told throughout the show was phenomenal. Like so much involved in it.
Yes, Wagwan and all that kind of stuff. You mean?
Yeah. Well, actually, that does lead very nicely to the next question that we've got here, which is about the colloquialisms and their role within copywriting. So obviously, again, another really big area of interest for you. So to the uninitiated, people like my mom and dad who might be watching this. Hi, mom and dad, if you are watching. Can you explain, Lee, what colloquialisms are and the role that they play in effective copywriting?
Yeah. So a colloquialism, it's a word or phrase that's not deemed formal or proper, I suppose, but it's used in everyday conversation. So a colloquialism would tend to vary from place to place. So, for example, if I say sound or boss, or I say lecky instead of electric, or offy instead of off license, that's a colloquialism. It's something that is unique to Liverpool. And obviously places all over the country and all over the world will have their own turns of phrase and their own language effectively, which you just touched on there with the kind of the Caribbean influence on the language in Top Boy and so on and so forth. So the kind of the uncommon words or phrases, I suppose, but that people use in everyday language, but it can be really, really effective in copy.
Yeah.
It's a fine balance. You can't overdo it. You've really got to understand your audience, but you can use them to great effect. It makes it sound natural and approachable if you get it right, and it helps people identify with the message if your writing sounds like they sound. And colloquialisms can be, have a major effect on that.
So one poet I really like is a guy called Tony Harrison from Leeds. I don't know if you've ever read any of his poetry, but that talks about life in Leeds in the 1970s, which, as you can imagine, wasn't always pretty. There was one actually, so it was called V, and it's like a double entendre where basically it's like that, that sort of thing that football fans would always do. And it's the idea of, one team versus another. So V being, Leeds v Man United or something like that. Yeah. And it was all about, it's been a long time since I read it, so I've got to make sure I get this right, this description. But in a nutshell, it's all about his derision for football fans and how self-destructive shocked if they are. In a weird way, you could interpret the V, and I know I sound like an English teacher now, but you could interpret the V to mean them versus themselves, because quite often within working class society and football fans in general, but especially back in those days, whilst it was very much the establishment versus them, it was to an extent also them against themselves and their own communities and the harm they were doing with the rise of hooliganism and things like that.
Yeah.
But the whole point around that is that there's so many colloquialisms in it that are used to paint the picture of Leeds at that time. And he even has an argument with someone, the protagonist within the poem, presumably Tony Harrison himself, has an argument with a football fan about, why do you do this? Why do you drink cans of lager? Why do you have fights every week? And the guy replies, listen, I can't remember the exact words, but it's like, I've lived all my life in fucking Leeds. Everyone's told me I'm never going to amount to anything, so I might as well act like that.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really powerful poetry, and I highly recommend anyone watching this to check it out. Even some of my American viewers who probably have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about or would be able to understand Yorkshire dialect. But it is really good. I just thought I'd mention that because that's one example of how powerful colloquialisms, especially area-specific colloquialisms, could be. I'm interested to know, actually, Lee, and I'm sorry to ask this because I didn't send you this as one of the questions, so I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit here.
No.
Are there any Liverpool poets that you look up to in that regard, or anyone that you follow who kind of uses those colloquialisms? You mentioned some of the phrases like, that we know within Liverpool, like boss and sound and la and all. Do you know anyone who you've read before who you think, that's a really good example of how to use it?
Yeah, Levi Tavari is phenomenal. And funny enough, you've asked me at a good time because it was only a week or so ago I came across a poem of his called Our Liverpool.
Okay.
The way he projects it is Our Liverpool. And he turns those colloquialisms on his head to kind of the poetry is about it doesn't matter what you think about us from an outside perspective. We are Liverpool and this is what we're about. So he uses a lot of Liverpool colloquialisms and slangs and terms terms maybe that outsiders might use against us, and flips it all on his head to kind of showcase the city. It's a fantastic poem and well worth checking out.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm going to make a note of that now so I can check it out and obviously let people know about it. So yeah, I mean, this this next question I've asked.
Sorry, just before you get to that, I'm sorry to interrupt. It was just it was really interesting what you're saying about the football poetry. Because I think similar to kind of like the hip hop thing, I think there's a lot to be said about tennis chants. In terms of witty writing in terms of phrase and stuff. And I remember being on the Cop many moons ago, and Paolo Di Canio was playing for West Ham. Fantastic player. And the travelling support, the West Ham fans started singing, "We've got Di Canio, we've got Di Canio," and without missing a beat, the Cop started replying. The Cop replied, "We've got your stereos. We've got your stereos." Just to completely turn that kind of the whole perception of Scousers on its head and take a little bit of ownership of it. And in terms of using colloquialisms to great effect, it was probably around that time Liverpool launched a kit. You have kit launches and you have big campaigns and stuff. And at the time, the Harry Enfield stereotype of Scousers was still.
Is that the calm down thing?
Calm down. So Liverpool Football Club, fair play to them. They got, I don't know, 100, 150 models sat in the Cop, all in the curly wigs, with the moustaches, and the ad was calm down. The new kit's coming soon. And that is a fantastic example of using a colloquialism and something that outsiders might use against you and taking a little bit of ownership and making it impactful because you're talking directly to your audience in a language they understand.
Oh, but it's brilliant, isn't it? I mean, it is knowing your sort of core demographic, and I've always loved that about Liverpool as a city since moving here. Its ability to would make fun of itself, its ability to self-deprecate to the point of listen, you can say all this and you can judge us. And I actually talked about this in the last episode with Della. If people are going to judge you, then you might as well turn it on its head and make something lighthearted out of it to show them that, listen, you can think what you want. We don't take ourselves so seriously that we're going to get het up about it. We'll just carry on living our life, and we know what we're about. And that's really what I love about the city, in general. It's that whole kind of, I don't really know what word you'd use to describe it, but identity is the word I always use to describe Liverpool. When people from the outside ask me about the city, is its identity,
Yes.
and how proud it is of that, which is brilliant. And to be fair, I'm a bit gutted I missed out on that photo shoot, because I would have liked to have had the moustache. Well, I've got the moustache. If I just shave all this off and get a perm job. So this next question I'm asking deliberately because I know you have an incredible anecdote to share. Well, I thought it was incredible. So when you told me this, I barely laughed for a good 30 seconds. So we've talked about how colloquialisms can be groundbreaking, innovative. On the flip side, can you tell me where it hasn't worked and could have? I can't even say this without laughing because it's got this thing in my head. You know which one I'm talking about, right? Just I tell you what, I'm not even going to finish asking the question. Just give me the example that you told me the other day. Yeah,
well, I worked at a station in Liverpool after Radio City called Juice FM, and it was a very, very localized station, and we would get away with talking in common terms, and it was very, very scouse in terms of the music and the output and everything. It was very, very focused on sounding like the people in the city in the city did, but being a victim of its own success, it was bought out by Capital, who turned it into Capital Liverpool a few years back. So I was there during the buyout process and whatnot. And one of my jobs at Juice was to write the imaging tags for the station. So the little sonic clips that you play on the station.
Yeah.
Juice FM, all that kind of stuff with key messages and whatnot. That was one of my jobs, and it was a really simple process. I'd write 10 or 20-second scripts, show them to the program controller. He'd say, "Yeah, this sounds like the station sounds." We get them produced. When Capital came in, we had to write them and then send them to London to be approved. So the first scripts I wrote, I think it was for the breakfast show, maybe promo on the breakfast show, and the London team sent them back with amends that said things like "your station on fleek," or the remixed show, the remixed show in the Northwest. And I'm just thinking, I mean, I think I'm being genuine when I say I didn't know what those words meant at the time. But obviously you've got these people in London thinking, "Oh no, these are the cool, trendy words. This is the way it should sound." But nobody in Liverpool used them at all. But
do you know why I'm laughing even more? Because I didn't even know the bit about the Remus show. I don't remember you saying that. Like they did not do their research of Liverpool, the city, did they, before they wrote that?
No. Yeah, but it was amazing. But you then have to argue the toss. You know what I mean? People don't know what it is, and no, yet they do. Everyone watches Towie or whatever it is, and just think you get left out the city. You'll have to rein it in with these. It was
just on when you said on fleek. I just imagined, and I'm not saying this to take the piss, but you just imagine a Scouser saying on fleek, especially the way that they pronounce the A's here.
On fleek.
On fleek. You've got to be fucking kidding me. They thought that was acceptable. But the remix show has surprised me even more, to be honest. I'm amazed that they put that in. But that, I mean, to be honest, that just kind of shows the ignorance, doesn't it? Of people down in London. No disrespect if anyone's watching from down there, but that whole kind of knowledge of, well, it's a perfect example of everything you've just said. Not knowing your target audience, just throwing a blanket over it and going, "Oh, people are saying Riemann on fleek in London or America. They say on fleek, so why not in Liverpool as well?" It's like you've got to understand your audience. I don't think that Paula, age 53 from Kirby, is going to be, saying on fleek anytime soon.
No, definitely not.
So that was a great. I mean, I don't know if we can top that, to be honest. Have you got any other examples of where an attempt to be clever has not worked, or any kind of projects you've worked on or been a part of?
I think, you know, using the radio example again, and without a particular example, but there was the sound test rather than the smell test, I suppose. Yeah. So because you would write a lot of station imagery stuff, and obviously you're broadcasting to Liverpool. You know, I'd often write, particularly station promos rather than client ads. You'd write station promos and think, oh, well, I'll use the word sound or boss or la or whatever it might be, provided if it fit into context.
Yeah.
Without considering that it wasn't a Scouser who was going to voice the script, it was a professional voiceover. So I remember writing a campaign, and I can't remember what the campaign was, but it was for a station promo and making it really Liverpool centric.
Yeah,
getting them signed off, you know, sending them off to the production hub, and then coming back in this kind of real Middle English voice, this real Middle English voiceover coming back, and you know. So sign up for our new boss competition, and you're just, oh no, do you know what I mean? So you'd always kind of have to bear in mind who was voicing it as well. So it didn't sound ridiculous.
Just that impression alone, man, that's just brilliant. That's the thing, isn't it? It's just because I've noticed that actually a lot within regional radio stations, is that the people who read the scripts out aren't from that region. It's like, I wouldn't sit there if you gave me a script. Like people who watch this may have divided opinion depending on who watches it. People from outside Liverpool may feel I have a slight Scouse twang. Somebody like you probably doesn't think so. But you know, if I would not even attempt to read stuff like that out, because I wouldn't want to offend people. You know, I just feel like it sounds so unauthentic. You know, it's like, so you do have to. I bet your heart must have sank though, because you weren't to know. I mean, from what you're saying, you weren't to know that he was.
I don't even think it was not. No, it was not thinking about it. Do you know what I mean? It was, you know, I'd probably had 100 scripts voiced by the same voiceover before. Yeah. But just on paper, you go, oh, this sounds cool. Like, you know, it gets exactly what I want to get across. It sounds like the people that we're talking to, and then it just hadn't occurred to me that actually it doesn't sound like the person who's reading it.
We've got to have a chapter for those two examples alone. When I timestamp on YouTube, that's a chapter, because that is sensational. So, in terms of measuring the effectiveness of language, and you know, it's very difficult to do this. You know, to be fair, but if we use the example of your emails that you send out to people. You know, with the, you know, obviously the colloquialisms that you use within that, you know, what are some of the metrics that you'll typically look at, or how will you kind of evaluate the effectiveness of the language that you're using?
You know, I think, you know, again, we kind of touched on this, Neil, in a conversation the other day, and I know you're, you know, you're ultra analytical, which is probably something I could do with improving. But for me, from an email point of view, it's really important to me to write how I speak, because I want to come across you know, as genuine and authentic. But again, I'm careful not to overdo it. I won't throw phrases in that people wouldn't understand if they're not from Liverpool for the sake of it. I was really conscious a couple of weeks ago. I'd written a newsletter about. I came up with this imaginary tequila brand to make a point, and I called it Mockingbird Tequila, which, funny enough, someone's got in touch and asked can they invest in it. I don't think they realised it was a joke. But I said, oh, you know, we could make a cocktail called the Jargarita.
Oh yeah, I know it. Jarg in the Scouse.
Yeah, so jargon. Jargon Liverpool means fake. So I thought, well, that's a great name for a non-alcoholic tequila cocktail, a Jargarita. Yeah. But I ummed and ahed over it for ages, because I thought there's going to be a very, very small portion of my audience who know what jarg means. But I included it anyway because it made me smile. But I think it's important to constantly monitor feedback. Obviously, with emails, you want to be checking your open rates and your click through rates and so on and so forth. So I suppose if it was ever flagged, or there was ever an example of open rates falling off a cliff because I'm particularly Scouse or you know, being over the top with the colloquialisms, I'd be very, very careful and rein it in, because you can't afford to alienate people as authentic as you might want to sound.
Yeah.
Again, it comes back to everything we've been saying throughout the podcast. You've really got to understand your audience and what they want, and not make it too much about you.
No, it's well, exactly. It's you, the audience, not us, the writer, basically.
Yes.
I think if you were to overdo that in, say, the subject line, that would probably harm your open rates quite significantly. Because one thing I'd never actually asked you, and you don't have to tell me this if you'd rather keep it confidential, but where are your email subscribers from? Do you have them from sort of all over the country? Because I imagine it must go a lot further than just Liverpool.
Yeah, so from all over the country. I've got a few in America as well. Probably she might be watching. She might end up watching this one. I think my biggest fan, who responds to every email virtually, is a lady in California who I've never met. Which is which is fantastic. It's really nice, and she always sends me such lovely feedback on it. But yeah, it started. It's still only relatively new. I think I've sent 25, 30 emails or something like that. I started it this year, so it did have a very Liverpool base. So obviously, it's friends, family, people that you know. You kind of spam the link with that first, but on the back of a few people sharing it on LinkedIn and on social and stuff. Yeah, it's getting much wider now. So the people up and down the country, as I say, even in the States, reading my Scouse twang.
I love that. You think California, that's 8 hours behind us, all the way the other side of the world, and she sends you such lovely feedback. And you know what that shows? It shows that you can strike the perfect balance between integrating the colloquialisms and the slang and telling a story, because you don't want it to get too saturated in trying to be, trying to be a comedian, basically, or trying to be too cutting edge. And this is my next question. You've obviously been able to strike that balance perfectly, but I think you and I can, because we talked about this the other day, we can both agree on the fact that there are a few people out there who have how would I put this nicely, a bit of a try-hard attitude towards being creative, basically, where people are either overdoing slang, overdoing colloquialisms, it helps if I can say it, they're either overdoing all of that, or they're just being outrageous for the sake of it, or both. They're making being outrageous a core part of their personality. Things like swear words in every sentence as well. Really dry humor that would probably be lost on most people. Now, I have to caveat this by pointing out that I use swear words and dry humor in some of my LinkedIn posts. I think anyone who's followed me for any length of time knows that. But I mean, I think, and I know I'm biased in saying this, that I know where to draw the line and when to talk seriously about myself and what I do. Because let's face it, we've said this before, people need to be able to take you seriously in order to do business with you. It is human to human at the end of the day, not business to business. And you need to know when to use colloquialisms, in my opinion. So, I mean, yeah, with that in mind, is that something you agree with, Lee? Do you think, that there is a fine line between using colloquial language and, quote unquote, reading the room when it comes to copywriting?
Yeah, I do. I sympathise with people who've kind of, I suppose, almost got stuck in that personality that they've developed for themselves, because, similar to the way you said, you use the occasional swear word or whatever it might be. I can be guilty of trying too hard and trying to stand out and be different and whatever, say this and whatever, be really dry, because ultimately we're all vying for attention, aren't we? Again, we spoke, really early on, you've got a very limited time to capture people's attention. So I kind of understand where it comes from in terms of that being outrageous and stuff. It's, it's a way to grab attention. But I think to kind of rinse and repeat and constantly do that, it's very difficult to keep up and be genuine, because nobody is that outrageous in real life. Nobody, well, few people might, but kind of swear that much and that kind of, I don't know, angry or whatever this persona they might be painting. I think it's very, very hard to keep up. And then from a client point of view, I don't think you can get away with it. I don't think you can get away with applying this kind of same outrageous approach to every client. And I think some of the creators that we come across seem to think that is the only way.
Yeah.
Let's be rude, let's be obnoxious, let's capture people's that attention that way. I think it can wear a bit thin.
I think that in certain people who watch this and know the marketing world well enough can probably put two and two together in regards to who I'm talking about. I'm not going to obviously, name names explicitly, but
yeah,
I think when you're in bigger cities in the UK, especially, you probably feel as though you have to be like that to stand out. And I get it. And you're right. We do need to have an element of sympathy for these people and their approach. But I also find it really tiresome. And you know what it is, Lee? It's not even so much, half the time, it's not so much the fact that they're using slang or colloquialisms. It's the fact that they're talking so obnoxiously to people as well. We've said this before, haven't we, about how some agencies will be like, you've worked, you have no idea what you're doing. Basically, you've worked with shit agencies in the past. We're not a shit agency. We're brilliant or whatever. And you just kind of think, get over yourselves. Like if I was a client reading that, and listen, they might not, do you know what? Even if they heard me say this, they might go, well, you're not our target audience, so we don't care. We want the people who work with us to love us. And if that works for them, then fair play. But me personally, I think it's very restrictive because we've seen during COVID how quickly people can lose a big source of their income.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, they would probably again argue the point that their client base is so loyal that they're on long-term retainers with them and they don't care. But let's say, for instance, that one of them goes, right, like you lose a big client who's on a even like a 4 or 5 day a month retainer. That could be very, very costly to an agency. If you've then got to go out and get new clients and only a tiny proportion of the population get you and what you're about, I think you're putting yourself in a really dangerous position personally, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. As I say, I think you're right in what you say, that you're really, really restricting yourself in terms of your potential client base, and for that reason, I think there's a lot to be said for toning it down. You can be a creative, a copywriter, a content strategist, whatever it might be, and have those opinions and speak the way you speak. But for me, you've got to be able to show that answers a brief.
100%.
And being obnoxious or rude or whatever doesn't answer 99 out of 100 briefs, I'd argue. So, you can do that. I like to think that I could do that if a client comes to me and said we want to be really obnoxious and rude and we want to offend a few people. I'm quite confident I could do that. I'm sure you could as well. But I think you've got to for it to be sustainable, you've got to be able to show the other side as well and be able to write something that is fluffy and lovely and romantic or whatever it might be.
You've got to create that emotional connection with your audience, but you also have to be very clear about what results you're going to get them, not what you do, because everyone can say what I do. Right, everyone can say that, but if the takeaway, right? So say if I'm on a website for an agency and my takeaway is, God, they're a little bit. I'll be honest with you. This might just be me. People can watch this and say whatever they want about. Oh, well, that's just how you think. But I would go on the websites of some of these agencies who are really outrageous, and my takeaway would just be, God, these lot love themselves a bit, don't they? And I wouldn't have that kind of blueprint in my mind of what they can actually do for me. Like, I see a lot of these agencies where they'll go big on that, but you don't really see them talk about the results. They've got clients. That is all anyone cares about. I don't care about whether you think you this or that, insert this colloquialism here or whatever. I don't care about that. I want to see what result. And then once you've proven to me what you can do, or you've shown me, how I'm going to benefit from spending a lot of money with you, then you could start using the colloquialisms. And I think with you, for instance, you've used it in a medium, which is perfect, because if someone's giving you their email address and is receiving your content, there's already that level of trust established. Whereas I think when people jump straight in to being too informal from the get-go and they don't know this person, I find that a little bit, it jars with me a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to be effective, doesn't it? On the surface of it. Power to them, I suppose, if it's working. But yeah, I do think there's a balance, and it can be a little bit too much. And look at me.
Yeah, exactly. So sorry to bring up the A word again, but AI, I said we were going to come back on to talk about it. So every man and his dog is talking about this right now. and everyone's saying the world's over, it's going to replace all of us, and you and I are going to be eating tins of spaghetti in 2 or 3 years' time. But I mean, to what extent do you think that AI could replicate some of the things that we've been talking about in this whole episode? Things like the colloquialisms and the informal language and the sort of everyday lexis, I suppose you could say. So like, how much do you think AI can replicate that element of creative craft? Not just for copywriters, but the people that they take inspiration from.
Yeah, I think it's a million miles away from that at this moment in time, in terms of being able to use phrases and come up with clever terms and use them in the right context. I think it's pretty much 12 months, I think, isn't it? Since ChatGPT came out, and I remember it being, this is the end of the world, and I don't think to me anyway, it doesn't seem like it's developed past what it was 12 months ago when everyone was saying, copywriters should run for the hills. But ultimately, it's machine learning, isn't it? And I don't think it's probably too far away with the likes of me and you and other copywriters and content creators. The more we feed it with the terms that we might use in the context and the places that we might use them, ultimately I think it'll learn how to do it. Whether it'll ever quite be able to do it the way a human does with having that source reference material to be able to choose when to use a certain term or when to use it. Whether it'll ever be able to quite grasp that, I don't know. But I don't think it'll be too long before it's not far away.
Supposedly, with ChatGPT-4, and I've got to be honest, I haven't used ChatGPT-4. I tend to just use the free version, but the paid version apparently has some really useful features. But I haven't used it yet, so I can't comment on that. What I will say is, I feel that it's more of an opportunity for us than a hindrance. And what I mean by that is that if you can put out content at scale and a lot faster, and you can use AI to give you the blueprint for what you're writing, like, you should never ever use it verbatim. I think if anyone puts a prompt into ChatGPT and just use what it spits out, that they're an idiot. Sorry to tell you that if you do that, anyone watching this, but individual prompts are really important. Being very clear with your prompts, but that ties into my sort of overarching point here, which is that you're always going to need a human to put the information in. You're always going to need a human to validate what comes back, and you're always going to need a human to apply it to the relevant mediums. So, it's like driverless cars. You're still going to need a driver in most instances anyway. You're going to need a driver behind the wheel to make sure the thing doesn't crash, So, like, whatever people say about AI, it can't magic a prompt out of thin air. Like, and maybe the day will come when it does that. I don't know. That's pretty scary if it could. But imagine if ChatGPT could start like saying, "You haven't come up with a content strategy for a while. Should we create one?"
Yes.
The day when a robot says we should write a blog post about this or that, you and I are fucked. Like,
we're finished. Absolutely finished.
Until that day, I don't really think there's an awful lot to concern ourselves with, because, as I said, you will always need human direction. I think of AI as basically being the actor, because in the most literal sense of the word, it is an actor acting as you, the writer. But you need a director. You need a director and a producer, and you are all of those things and more when it comes to AI, I think.
Yeah, I don't disagree. As I say, for me, I just think at the rate at which these things learn at, I don't doubt that within a few years there'll be some scary stuff that it's capable of. But to be honest, at this moment in time, I very rarely use it even for research and stuff, because I just find it to be so clunky and so inaccurate and poorly written at times that it's easier to draft things myself. Now, whether that's because I haven't spent enough time learning how to become a prompt engineer rather than a copywriter, I don't know. And I'm sure there's plenty of room for people who specialize in being prompt engineers for AI. There's a guy called Rob Lennon. I don't know if you follow on Twitter. He's worth a look. He's kind of really embraced AI since day one, from a copywriting background. And some of the stuff he gets from it is absolutely fantastic. But I think that is a skill in itself. I think you're either a prompt writer or a prompt engineer or a copywriter. And I think they're two completely different things at this moment in time.
What I did want to ask, and this isn't a serious question. Well, it kind of is, because I do want an answer. Do you think that AI could have written a better script than the people at Capital FM did, or the people who wrote that Fleek and do you think AI maybe could have done better if you'd have given AI a prompt and said, write this in Scouse English, or do you think it would be close? I don't know. Well,
maybe, given the size of Global, maybe they had the first AI and we just didn't know about it, and it was because it certainly
was a robot before there were robots.
Yeah, so it wouldn't surprise me. But it did have that feel that someone had typed in, or what are some phrases that cool kids say?
Yeah. And that's what AI is, because that's why I said it. On a serious note, sometimes what ChatGPT will come back with is like that. Like if I said now, I've done a podcast with a guy from Liverpool. How can I promote this using, Scouse colloquialisms or Scouse slang? And I'm sure what it would spit back would be awful. Like it wouldn't sound like you. I mean, maybe it would. Maybe that's the scary thing. I'll have to check out this. Maybe do a test.
Have a go.
Yeah, I had to ask that. But yeah, Lee, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. Yeah, it's been absolutely fantastic. Just one final question before you go. So if anyone wants to connect with you or ask you anything, or just have a general chit chat, where can they find you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active. So it's Lee O'Connor. But if you'd like to check out my website or sign up for my newsletter, then head to solococreative.co.uk.
Brilliant. Cheers, Lee.
Thanks, mate. Really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you.